Good afternoon and welcome to this Hudson Institute discussion on Brazil. My name is Dan Batlle and I'm an adjunct fellow at Hudson. It is said among people who work on Latin America that Brazil is not for beginners. And I think that statement accurately reflects the complexity of the country, its politics, and its role in the world. So I'm especially pleased today to have this particular group of speakers who bring deep expertise and experience on Brazil. To my immediate left, I have Marcio Coimbra. He is CEO of the Instituto Monitor da Democracia, a think tank in Brasilia. In the middle, Rafael Favetti, founder and partner of the law firm that bears his name, the Sociedade de Advogados Favetti in Brasilia. And Mark Langevin, who is senior advisor at Horizon Engage, as well as faculty member at the Foreign Service Institute and the Schar School at George Mason. I want to start today's discussion with Marcio and ask you to set the scene for our discussion and provide your perspective on Brazil's trajectory here at the halfway point of Lula's third term in office.
First of all, thank you a lot, Dan, for the invitation. It's an honor to be here at the Hudson Institute with you, with all the other speakers that are here, with our audience, and all the others that are following us through the internet. Well, we are in the middle of Lula's term, and I think that there was improvement in many levels, but there are faults in many others. I think that the lowest point of his presidency is definitely international relations, because he didn't position himself properly regarding to Venezuela, which is a neighbor that has many refugees coming to Brazil and is creating a big problem in our frontier, and also creating an instability in our country and in many other countries that are in the region. So I believe that Mr. Lula da Silva lost his touch considering Venezuela. We also believe that Mr. Lula da Silva didn't go really well engaging with the BRICS discussion, standing alongside Russia, just like Bolsonaro was already alongside Putin in his term. And it looks like Brazil hasn't changed in this matter. That should have changed since the last administration. But you know, Brazil's policy in the Bolsonaro government and in the Lula government towards Russia is the same. Brazil is supporting Russia and therefore is not supporting Ukraine as much as it should. We know that Brazil is part of the Western world, and we believe that we should stand up for democracy, we should stand up for human rights, we should stand up for the rule of law, and it looks like to me that regarding Venezuela and that regarding Russia, Brazil is the wrong side of the track. So I believe that for a start, it would be like that, because if I talk too long, I won't let my fellow friends here have time to put their ideas, and I believe we'll have a lot of time to discuss, and after in the Q&A we can deliver more answers regarding the Lula administration. But regarding the international affairs, I think this government has made many mistakes and should have done better. I mean, there's the problem of fiscal responsibility that I believe Favetti will talk much more better than I would do about this. But in international relations, it looks like to me that we missed the point of changing a government and missed the point of supporting democracy as we should.
Thank you, Marcio. Mark, give us a sense of the economic picture in Brazil right now and what we should be looking out for. What challenges Brazil faces during the next year or two?
Yeah, definitely. I'll try to be short about this. I must confess, though, I came out of the pandemic Zooming with Lula in my kitchen. It sounds like a novel, but it was real reality. You know, he was obviously thinking about running for president, and he wanted a different opinion than the Workers' Party or Celso Amorim, Itamaraty. So he and his lawyers got a hold of me. I don't know why. And we started Zooming and talking about how to engage the United States, and we came up with kind of a plan to engage Biden. Unfortunately, that window is kind of closing, and we can follow up on that, especially given the comments that Marcio has just made. But I think it's kind of interesting. At this point, I would have thought that Lula would have made more foreign policy successes and fewer economic and fiscal policy successes, but it's actually been the other way around. Last week's announcement that Moody's was upgrading the federal government debt is a recognition that the administration and the Brazilian Congress, despite occasional fireworks and disagreements and orçamento impositivo, these kinds of weird things, Brazil's making progress. Obviously with tax reform, modest but aspirational, and it's being recognized around the world. Haddad's, the finance minister's fiscal policy framework, it didn't satisfy everybody, but maybe that's the point, right? In a minimum winning coalition in the legislative branch, you don't want to please everybody. You want the cheapest legislation to pass. I think Haddad got that. And it lays out a roadmap for the Brazilian tax system to become a little bit more efficient, a little bit more just, a little bit broader. And that's what has been recognized around the world. This year, the first part of this year, last part of 2023, foreign direct investment kind of declined, but it declined throughout the region in Latin America. So that wasn't a big thing, I don't think. I think that's going to start picking up as this new legislation like, Fuels of the Future and these other kind of domestic kind of promotional policies sector by sector start picking up. We're going to see some more FDI, I think, especially in 2025. But Lula, Haddad, their partners in Congress, like him or not, Arthur Lira, Pacheco, they've been working hard to do what they can, given the politics of rent-seeking in the Brazilian Congress, which is a sport. And there's a lot of gold medalists in that arena too. But they've done what's feasible politically to move that fiscal policy forward. And I think what we're going to see in the last 2 years, the administration, is some of the effects on the economy. I think we're going to see more investment across, industries and so forth. Nothing like that's going to, be 2010 over again. But Brazil is outperforming the IMF's forecast, a lot of people's forecasts. IMF adjusted to 2.1. I think we're going to land somewhere around 2.5 in 2024, depending on the last couple months. Brazil's kind of outperforming. I think just to finish it, of course, Brazil's future rests not only with China's consumption, which has been plateauing, but you know what? It's still pretty darn high. But maybe that will begin to decline as well. A lot in the United States, the most value-added exports, Brazilian exports come to the United States. And so it's really important that the United States grow and so forth. And we need to do more work. I guess Marcio and Rafael and I and Daniel need to do more work to bring these countries together on a trade investment thing so that they can both enjoy what could be a complementary relationship in manufacturing. But we've got a lot of work to do. But I think the big thing out there is India. We've seen some movement by the government. We've seen a few sectors begin to look at India. That's where Brazilian growth is going to be fired up, right? And it's not going to be smooth. India is a huge country with its own manufacturing base. So those issues have to be worked out. But I think it's going to start with commodities. We've seen movement on biofuels. Obviously, India is starting to prepare to buy larger amounts of Brazilian crude oil. So that's a good recipe for Brazilian growth. But Brazil needs to learn the lesson of China. It can't all be commodities, right? And that's why Brazil and the United States and maybe the European Union have got to start working together to figure out how they can build manufacturing value chains that go beyond their adjacent neighbors like Mexico and Canada in the US case. But I think India is something that we need to discuss more to figure out how Brazil can maximize that bilateral relationship. Yeah, thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, Mark. Rafael, there's been recent changes in rules in Brazil, essentially allowing the Brazilian Congress a greater latitude with earmarks. Can you talk about what this means for governance in Brazil?
Thanks so much. Thanks for everything that be here. First of all, the budget in Brazil, its historical terms, is 90% in the hand of executive branch, to the discretionary spend. But in few years from now, less than 10 years from now, the Congress take 50%. So it's a huge amount of the budget, the union budget, that goes to the parties, the congressmen and the senators. But all the national policies is still with the executive branch. So this create in the popularity, in the voters, etc., constant frustration, because mayors need to talk now to congressmen, to senators, to have money, not more to the ministers, to the federal administration. The federal administration is still in the responsibility to design and to execute all the policies, but the budget is with the Congress. So it is a new model of federation. I have no fear to say to you that right now we live a kind of a parliament model in terms of budget, of course. And this is the real deal to the next years. And why is the real deal? Because congressmen and senators looking just for their own home. They do not look for the big picture in Brazil, of course, but the federal government must look to the big picture. So even with Lula or Bolsonaro or Tarcísio, this is a very, very, very dangerous issue. And the danger is the eternal frustration of the people, of the popularity, and etc. So even if Lula lost the election, by the book, all the incumbents win the election. So by the book, we are talking about 8 years of PT. Even if Lula lose the election to Tarcísio, or if the Bolsonaro can remove all the limits that the judicial bench puts on him, even with Bolsonaro, even with Lula, we will see other frustration in the end of the administration. Because the model is this is the structure of the model. So I think that this is new. All the analysis guys must be seeing, and you are seeing that. And I love that you say that to China, that we are very dependent on China because the commodities. To China, we just deliver commodities, and to America, we deliver airplanes. To China, we deliver oil, soil, and iron. It's another kind of trade, of course. This depend of China. This dependency of China. It's very in the long term, especially in the long term, not in the short term. It's especially put Brazil in a difficult. We depend of China. We depend of construction in China. If the Chinese are buying new homes, we are good. If Chinese are not buying new houses, we are not so good. This is amazing for the long term. So I think that this is two big issues that we live right now in Brazil. The new model of budget and the extreme dependency of trade with China.
Mm-hmm. How will Brazil be able to control its fiscal deficits with this system? Are there limits in place on this earmarking, or could we see ballooning fiscal deficits in Brazil?
To me? Mm-hmm. Okay. We have two main problems to the fiscal debt in Brazil. There's the pension, the social pension, and the health system. The health system is public, universal. It's open to everyone in Brazil. So this constitutional right pressure a lot the budget, and the social pension too. Mr. Bolsonaro in his government, everybody knows, make a huge reform in the social pension, in the social system, but it's only for workers in private sector. He do not move nothing to the workers in the state sector. So this is a huge problem too. I think that Lula maybe until 2 years from now, maybe change something like this. And all the people, we have a new law about fiscal responsibility. It's called Lei Complementar. It's an act called 200. And this act, I don't think that the Congress will change this act. This act will remain. The problem is the track of the fiscal debt in the future. Right now, we are almost within 70 and 77%. But it's possible that before 2027, we go to 8%, and this go until 2030 to 100%. If you take America, it's not a problem because America, I think that's 150%. If you take Japan, it's above 300%. If you take a lot of countries, it's not a problem. But for us, it's a problem. And why for us is a problem? Because our rates, and you mentioned the Moody's, our rates somehow depends on the fiscal debt and the track of fiscal debt. What we're seeing right now, what we're seeing in this morning, we've seen this morning that we call the alligator mouth of the tax rate open. So in the future, investors are not believing in Brazil. In the future, all the taxes of the government, we call Selic. It's a rate from that government pay for investors. Our rate. In the future, all of rates are higher than now. What this means? Investors are not believing in Brazil. Of course, the risk is too much. And why they're not believing in Brazil? Because the track of fiscal debt. Track of fiscal debt, it's an important talk in economy. We have new economists that say, India, we have a lot of economists that say, fiscal debt track is not important. There are other things that are important, but this is heterodoxos. The orthodoxal system, the orthodoxal thought, the orthodoxal basis of economy is fiscal debt matter. And in these terms, I think that Brazil is in not so good avenue because we had a lot of problems with the trust of investors and what the government are delivering for that. Even with Mr. Haddad saying, doing everything that he can. Mr. Haddad is not a typical minister of PT. He's not a typical one. He's a guy that talks a lot of fiscal debt. There's a guy that talks a lot of the track of fiscal debt. There is a guy that talks a lot the necessary reforms in the inputs and outputs of the budget. PT wrote a lot of things against Haddad, and Lula still remains Haddad. Before the Moody's change, elevate the rate of us, Lula go with Haddad in the three major companies. What does this mean? It means that Lula are saying to the left people, Haddad will still the minister until the end. This is important, okay? Because a lot of people say Haddad will not handle until the end. The left people will change Haddad. And I think that if Lula are saying and are proving that Haddad will stay, he will stay. But the problem of the track of fiscal debt remains.
Okay. Thank you. That's an important point.
Can I offer like a counter to that?
Please.
You know, I've heard this for decades. You know, the Brazil cost, this and that. Foreign direct investors that want to produce and sell in the Brazilian market, they keep on coming. You've got over 200 million people. You've got a base of very well-educated people. The foreign direct investors, not the portfolio, but people that are going to build plant and produce or provide a service, they're looking at Brazil. They're not looking at the Selig, or they're a little bit concerned about inflation when it came out of the pandemic. But the things that they're looking at are a couple things. One, they're not looking at post-pandemic, they're looking post-2014 recession. And the leading indicators, the structural indicators in Brazil, they're starting to come back to that benchmark, like 2013, 2014, including with regard to a number of fiscal policy issues, whether it's pension or government revenues. In 2014, 60% of the adult working age population was working. Now we have 62%. Even that 2% is what people are looking at in terms of disposable income, size of market, if they want to sell shampoo, whatever it is, right? They're also looking at investment in education. And it's not like primary, high school. It's like technical people, right? Technical people. So they're looking at that. And what that is based on is productivity. And that's the lagging variable that Brazil struggles with. That is the thing that a private direct investor, say the ones that I work with, especially in the energy sector, they want to see Brazil develop more economic policies that discipline market actors with respect to productivity. That is to say, reward high productivity and squeeze out low productivity firms. So that's an ongoing thing. We hope that the tax reform will make a contribution to that process. But if Brazil wants to aspire, it's got to raise its productivity. And that's a combination of several things. Better post-secondary education for everybody, You've got kids in the comunidades in Rio that are never going to be prepared. That's at your cost. In Brasilia, when you earn a federal government public servant pension, ultimately the viability of that pension rests on, can you get that child to a technical school and do value-added work and so forth. That's why Boeing is trying to take the specialists from Embraer, because there's potential there. So it's productivity, it's technology transfer. The agricultural sector has improved its productivity and technology, but it's concentrated within that sector. There's very little spillover. Technology transfer comes from manufacturing and high-level services that address manufacturing, artificial intelligence, that kind of thing. The natural partner is the United States, So it's that, it's working on those issues that are going to advance Brazil and also let it develop a more substantial relationship with actors like Marcio said, this relationship between aspiring, climbing the ladder of productivity and finding yourself in a more sustained position with respect to democracy and human rights. Because what we know about developing technology, transferring it across borders and so forth, firms, they want a transparent marketplace, but they surely don't want, systemic human rights abuses, political uncertainty that comes from authoritarian regimes and so forth. So I think those are keys too that FDI, people that want to transfer technology to Brazil are looking at.
Can I agree?
Please.
I thought that was disagree, but I agree. The productivity of the worker in Brazil are falling down. That's a huge problem. Okay, we are falling down in that, and the federal government had two programs very important for that. They're very important to try to get better the productivity of the workers, but these two programs are very attacked by especially the investor of financial system, because this will increase the fiscal debt. So, in one hand, we must have policies that increase the education and the productivity of the workers and the companies and etc. But on the other hand, this costs money. And when it costs money, all the financial market, Brazilian financial market, not foreign financial market, say, oh, you are increasing fiscal debt, so it's a problem, and etc. All the medias internal in Brazil are against all the policies of that increase better things for the workers and especially for the companies in productivity. And finally, we have this battle between financial market, that is important, of course, and investors, etc., and directly investors that will invest. We have about R$500 billion already contracted, already right now contracted to invest. It's a lot of money for us, of course, in the private sector. The PAC program is it's an accelerate program of Lula that is we are not seeing yet. It's almost R$1 trillion, and it's not public money; it's private money. So if this occurs, of course, we will change a lot of things, and at least Petrobras, that is an important company in Brazil, are dealing internally are dealing with the Minister of Environment and the Agency of Environment to start to take oil in the Amazonas River when he ends. Okay? If this occur, all the region of north of Brazil, that's a poor region, okay, will change. And we'll see a lot of more ports, a lot of more people going there, a lot of more engineers going there, and this will change, I think, geopolitically Brazil, especially if we take Guyana and Venezuela. And if all of this occur, we can increase the productivity of workers, increase the productivity of companies, new level of oil in Brazil, and etc. We will going up. We call it the hiato do produto, the GDP potential. We will change the GDP potential. Our GDP potential right now it's almost 4.7, so it's very low. So we must change the GDP potential, and I think that we will be like this, but this demands time. So I don't know if Lula can do this in the last 2 years. Okay, so in these 2 years we have the frustration that I talked before.
Since we're on the topic of productivity, we had a panel here with a couple economists from the World Bank a couple months ago. Talking about their work on increasing productivity in the region. And in the case of Brazil in particular, the World Bank has done some very interesting work on the geographic dimension of productivity and really looking at how cities in Brazil and in Latin America are falling behind as engines of their economies. And what the World Bank has found, some of it is not new, obviously deindustrialization and other things like that happening in cities. But they find geographic inequities within cities where you have large pockets of cities that have informal economies. So they propose much stronger transit infrastructure systems within cities in Brazil. Does this resonate with what you see?
Well, actually, the cities are what generate the wealth in a manufacturing services economy. And so, the cities in the center west that, 30 years ago were nothing are now developing into, more value-added services, some manufacturing of agriculture-related things. But the rest of the country, cities don't have a development plan. And I think there's been some research actually done at George Washington Elliott School on technological forecasting and so forth, like the São Paulo corridor from São Paulo up to Ribeirão Preto. There are cities that actually do have a development plan, A lot of it's keyed to the information technology, sector. But each city are trying to specialize in different kinds of firms because these smaller IT firms, whether they're foreign or domestic, they hire specialized talent, electrical engineers, so forth, that are coming from some other place. And they want a few things. The number one thing, obviously, is security, public security. And that successive governments, worker party governments, Temer, everybody, just on a federal level failed because it's really a state and local problem, and it's just hard to put it all together. But public security, really good transportation infrastructure, including public. These are more worldly people that want to get on a bus that runs on biofuels or electricity and so forth. So I think the federal government needs to create kind of a process whereby cities kind of, pick their slice in the economy and design their city around firms that play in that slice. But getting back, think about Amapá, where Block 59 is in the Foz do Amazonas Basin. Which is a long way from the Amazon River. It's closer to Guyana and the Exxon play there. But the GDP of Amapá is on par with the royalties paid by the oil and gas sector to the state of Rio de Janeiro. So if there's oil up there, it's going to transform that part of Brazil. Now, the thing that's really interesting, though, is, Brazil is run by Paulistas and Cariocas, people from São Paulo and Rio. And for many, many decades, they did not want Petrobras in that neck of the woods. It's about the allocation of resources. So there's still a distributional conflict. We think of it as redistributional from a government fiscal policy sense. But in terms of investment, there's still battles, regional battles over the allocation of scarce resources that will enrich communities. And when you have royalties coming in at the pace of Guyana or Rio de Janeiro, you don't have to think so much. You just spend, and firms come and try to hook onto that spending, right? But short of that, if you're in Tocantins or Piauí, you got to think 3 times about what your city wants to do in this global political economy, and there's always a solution. But I think it takes a federal government-led process to give those municipalities the resources, technical resources, to figure it out. And then they can go forward. I know a lot of small towns in Minas Gerais who are now specializing in IT products like smartphone apps and so forth, and doing very well. Because they're developing a globalized service. So they can be a small Minas Gerais town of 30,000 and be really ramping up skills, productivity, and revenue for the city as their workers, spend money in the city.
Marcio, I want to come back to you. You mentioned President Lula's diplomacy on Venezuela. It seems like there has been a little bit of moderation in recent weeks on this issue. Do you think that is a reflection of the government seeing what is happening in Venezuela, or is it political realities in Brazil? What do you make of it, and could you imagine a shift in other areas of Brazil's diplomacy?
I think we face a big problem concerning Brazilian diplomacy, because President Lula party and President Lula government are different things. And President Lula's party recognized Maduro as the winner in Venezuela, but Brazil haven't. So what we see is that Lula feels pressured by his party and he cannot lose support of his party. So he tends to be in the middle of the ground. So he doesn't go forward and he doesn't go backwards, and he stays there in the middle without doing anything. And Brazil feels paralyzed with that. So Brazil took a step to go there to talk to Maduro, but is not able to mediate that. First, because Brazil's left is not modernized. We are living in an old left, and a left from the 1980s, from the 1990s, with the unions, with a far from the reality left. Instead, for example, a new left that respects things like human rights, like Chile, is taking a step further, making pressure against Venezuela. So looks like the Brazilian left didn't modernize itself, and it's stuck in the past. And this is a problem for Lula. And at this time, this is a big thing that cannot let the country go forward with this issue. So Brazil now, regarding the diplomacy, is not modern, and it was not a modern right with Bolsonaro. It's not a modern left with Lula, because as we see, a modern right is like the government of Uruguay, like Luiz. And what we see as a modern left is what we see in Chile. And Brazil is in between without being able to do anything, and making mistakes with Israel, making mistakes supporting Hamas, making mistakes supporting Maduro somehow, because when you were silent against Maduro, you were endorsing Maduro. And that's a big problem of what is happening in our country and what is happening in Latin America. So Brazil was stuck in the past without making any effort to looking forward to the future. And this could be a big thing that could damage Lula's image looking forward to the election in 2026.
About Venezuela, can I say two things? Two things. First, Venezuela is important to Brazil because the number of immigrants that we receive. We receive in the last 100 years a lot of Italians, a lot of Japanese people, a lot of German people. We have the slavery problem with the Africans, but right now, Venezuela is the most immigrant ethnia in history. If you put all together Germans, Japanese, Africans, Italians, Venezuela now is more. So this is a problem, okay? But on the other hand, in our countries that we have a neighborhood, that as Argentina, we have $20 billion in trade with Argentina per year. In Venezuela, it's 700 millions. It's nothing, absolutely nothing. Venezuela to Brazil and nothing is almost the same in trade. So this is important. What Marcio said, it's very important in diplomatic scenario. But in trade scenario, the relationship between Brazil and Venezuela is unexisting. And not for now, it's for many years. So this is important when we talk about Venezuela and we talk about Cuba. The trade with Cuba is just cigars, nothing more. We had in the past decades we had some doctors, but it's about 1,000 doctors. It's not so to Brazil is nothing too. So I think that's very important in diplomatic picture, but in the trade picture, in the real picture, no one of the Brazilians that are here have nothing that come from Venezuela that are using, that eating, nothing. There's not an issue, but I know that in diplomatic terms, it's very important that as you say, we endorse and etc.
Something that is important in Venezuela is that we're talking about a military regime, and which means is that there's a military behind Maduro, about 700 to 1,000 people. So if we talk about an amnesty to change their the situation, we're talking about an amnesty about 1,000 people. So Maduro is not a dictator because he's not the one and only dictator in the country. I mean, he's the puppet of many, many military people. So he's not a dictator with full power. He's a dictator that is a puppet of the military that is there. So, which means that the problem is far worse than we imagine. It's not to take Maduro out and put somebody else in. Because if we put somebody else in, we have 1,000 military behind controlling all the structures of the states. Of the state, I mean, I'm talking about oil, I'm talking about mining, I'm talking about everything. These guys control a chain of corruption inside the Venezuelan government that it's organized crime. This is an organized crime, and what we need to do with Venezuela is not to change only Maduro. There is need to be a deep change. And if this military feel the pressure from foreign countries, they can even take Maduro out and deliver Maduro to the United States to be arrested and substitute Maduro by a new puppet. And so the problem is much further than Maduro, is deeper, and the organized corruption system of Venezuela is much more deeper and worries much more than we imagine. We're not talking about one dictator. We're talking about a corrupt system.
Can I add on something to Marcio? Because I think Marcio's right on about Venezuela, and I think we're all a bit disappointed from a number of different angles. I think from U.S. State Department officials that I've talked to and some Brazilian diplomats, they did a good job working kind of in this regional coalition to set in process what turned out to be maybe the freest and fairest conditions for a Venezuelan election in many, many cycles. But then Maduro and his 1,000 military guys who have a lot to lose decide, they're not going to count the ballots and just declare their victory, right? And that's very, very disappointing. I personally, because I've worked with the Workers' Party for decades, and I know the Secretary of International Relations quite well of the party, very disappointed at their statement that came out, within 24 hours, I think, or 48 hours, of Maduro declaring his victory. A very disappointing statement. But I think, Brazil and most countries, they need a vibrant center-right, a vibrant center, a vibrant left-leaning social democratic force, and so forth. So, I don't go back and forth about, loyalties. We need different perspectives in this democratic political spectrum. But the thing about the Latin American left, and I think the Workers' Party now, I agree with Marcio, it's kind of like, the leftovers. They see themselves growing out of this historic battle against fascism in Europe. That's what they identify with, right? And, in Chile, Boric, he's a younger guy. His left-leaning proposals and so forth come out of out of a thinking about how we're going to organize the 21st century. Not about World War II and fascism and so forth. That's different than the Workers' Party. In fact, I think what slowed down the development of the Workers' Party into a new generation, right, younger people with an outlook similar to Boric, was the rise of Bolsonaro. Because he represents a fascist alternative to Brazil. Whether it's in style or substance, we can debate about that. But at least in appearance, it was enough to convince the old guard in the Workers' Party that, oh God, we're fighting fascism again, right? And so it just kind of reinforced all the things that hold the Workers' Party back from promoting a new generation of leaders that look, feel, talk a lot more like Boric in Chile than Celso Amorim. And that's another case altogether. One of the things that I'm really disappointed about, because I was convinced when I was working with Lula in 2021 and early 2022, that Biden and Lula could really make the difference on things like Venezuela and human rights. And it looked like they did make some success. But I really think that, I don't think Lula's listening to the Workers' Party as much as he used to. I think that's over, to be quite honest. But Celso is still down the hall from him. And that's a problem because I see Brasilia, a lot of younger new thinkers, Marcio included, and a lot of colleagues that I've had, in the past, I'm older, but in the past decade, that are quite capable of steering Brazilian foreign policy in a way that's traditional to the Itamaraty, the foreign ministry, but that emphasizes this struggle over democracy and human rights that is always there, but now with Putin and Xi and even Modi in India, these are issues about human rights and fair representational elections and so forth. So, yeah, I think I would just add on to what Marcio said about that. But I think it's an issue for the United States too, because we need to work with the Latin American left and right, but within a democratic context that promotes human rights. And oddly enough, Biden was a great administration in the U.S. sense in promoting those values, and we hope to sustain that in some way or another.
I want to turn to the to the municipal elections for a minute. I realize that municipal elections in Brazil are really are run on local issues, not national politics. But do you see the results of the municipal elections as a repudiation of this failure of the PT to modernize? We saw center-right parties and the big center parties perform the best in these elections. So how do you read these results, allowing that there's still a few runoff elections happening at the end of this month?
If you take the Works Party, the PT, to 2012 from now, from 2020, PT lose about 100 mayors, lose about 1,000 local congressmen, and lose 27 federal congressmen, and lose about 7 senators. Is a lot of things. But in this time, PT elected Dilma in 2014 and re-elected Lula. And in the middle term, put Haddad in second term against Bolsonaro. So we see that PT is going down as party in the local terms. Okay, but in this election, they stop the track. Okay. The track stopped, puff. But it stopped the track with 1 billion reais in the fund. It's a lot of money. It's the second major fund, and the presidency. So they stopped the track of down, but the negative track. But is still so shy with 1 billion fund and the presidency. Okay? In 2030, we will see the end of the electoral reform that Rodrigo Maia, the former Speaker of the House, put on the streets. And in our analysis, we will have some 8 to 12 functional parties. Right now, we have 32 parties registered. And functional parties, what is functional party? Functional party is that party that have at least 3 congressmen. Right now, we have about 18 functional parties. But in 30s, we will have most 12 functional parties. And this is very, very, very challenging for PT. PT do not exist anymore as a party. It's important. PT right now, formally, PT is a federation with 2 other parties, the Greens and PCdoB and the Communist Party. No, Rede, né? Rede, the Greens and Sustentabilidade. So formally, PT do not exist anymore, and PT have Lula, but do not have young politicians in local terms. And this is very, very, very challenging for PT. In the left, I think that PSOL are getting all the LGBTQA plus issues, all the Afro-Americans, Afro-Brazilians issues, all the religious minority issues are in PSOL, not more in PT. Okay, PT lose that. So I think that the results of this election, local, you said very well, will show us the design of the next Congress, not of the next presidency. We do not have data that allowed us to say that who win local win presidency, but we have data that show us that who win local shape the Congress. So the next Congress will be a center-right Congress, of course.
Without a renewal of leadership, we need to think what will be PT without Lula in the future. And I think that Mark has a great point when he's saying that there is not new leadership in the PT right now. And without Lula, Lula is almost 80 years old. Without Lula, we need to think what will become of PT. It's going to be a party without a leader. And without his leadership, I don't even see a party right now because of this fraction on the left that Favetti is talking about.
Okay.
Can I just add something? Because I agree with Rafael and Marcio about that. I think there's another thing that's happening, which I consider fairly optimistic, and that is this kind of process where Gilberto Kassab's party, the Social Democratic Party, has now eaten up the old Tucanos and become that thing, but not in a sense a rivalry with the PT, but as a kind of modern centrist party. And obviously, because of his position with Tarcísio Freitas, he has a direct organic link to the Republicanos, another kind of center-right, traditional rent-seeking party that could go anyway, right? So I think, and young politicians in Brazil, I don't know a lot of them, but I try to drink beer with all of them. If I can gather them up, I'll pay the first and last round. But look, everybody wants a winner. If it's PT in 2006, everybody's PT, right? If it's the Social Democratic Party in 2024, everybody's with Kassab, right? I mean, there is a thing in Brazilian culture about wanting to win, right? And not letting the Argentines win the cup. That's always there, right? It's a little bit different in a two-party system in the United States where there's more stricter lines, right? But when you have men running the party of the women in Brazil, there's some other dynamic taking place. And I think that is going on, right? So in a weird way, and we see this in Fortaleza in the second round, how the PT and the PL, the Liberal Party of Costa Neto and maybe Bolsonaro, they love this polarization because it's the old war, fascists against communists kind of thing and stuff like that. But Kassab and this kind of centrist movement provides Brazil with a real option in 2026 of getting beyond that and building a responsible centrist government that continue the things that work good under the Lula administration and discard those things that aren't working. Maybe things that Rafael is talking about, trying to cut the budget and so forth. So I see some optimism there, I think weirdly Kassab is this historic creature that can, he can talk to Bolsonaro, Tarcísio Freitas, and Lula in a half an hour. Not all together, but in a half an hour. I mean, everybody takes his call. So he's kind of the kingmaker right now, and he's in the seat to determine potentially who takes over the executive branch. But weirdly, just to finish this off, You know, the Brazilian presidency under both democratic and authoritarian regimes has always been kind of a strong man until it's a strong woman, and then you get all the misogyny built into that, right? Gilma will talk about that. But maybe Brazil's starting to come to the US model. Our model of the presidency is a much weaker presidency where Congress rules. The only thing that is kind of missing is there's way too much rent seeking in the Brazilian Congress. You know, if you study the American Congress, we have what we call the minimum winning coalition. You want to get in a majority to pass your legislation, but with 50% plus one of the votes. Why? Because you don't have to shell out bacon. You don't have to pay for the legislation. And what we're seeing right now in Brazil for decades is you're paying 60, 70%. When I see some of these pieces of legislation pass with 65% of the vote, and guys from the PT and the PL, the Liberal Party, voting for the same piece of legislation, I'm saying that's way too expensive.
That is important. The index right now of Lula, Lula do not have the majority in Congress. The majority is very independent, but the index is 75%. He approved a lot.
Way too expensive.
Yeah.
I want to open things up to questions from the audience, but before I do, I want to recognize a group that we have visiting from ABRIG, from the Brazilian Association for Government Relations. And leading the group, we have João Castro, and I want to offer the floor to you to say a few words and add any comments or questions you might have.
Well, okay, first of all, thank you to having us in this important meeting, in this very important debate about Brazil. And we are here to represent all the professionals of institutional and governmental relation from different sectors. And I'm very glad to see you again, Mark.
My brother, fellow Capa Preta.
Yeah. And this is a very important moment to ABRIG, to our association. And I really like to thank you and the Hudson Institute to this moment, because it's and Professor Marcio Coimbra and Rafael Favetti represent us in this moment, in this discussion. And we are in Brazil, total disposition of the Hudson Institute to continue this kind of debate, and I think is very good for the two countries, the two people of Brazil and the United States, to continue to advance in a lot of issues of both countries. And we have a lot to do together with countries, with people, and I think this is the better way for all the Latin American. And thank you very much again.
Thank you. Thank you. I agree with everything you said, and I look forward to continuing the conversation in the future. Any questions from the audience? In the back.
Thank you. Brian McGuire, I'm a journalist with European Networks. Just from the European side, it was referenced really at the very beginning as well. In terms of FDI and Brazil's relationship with Europe currently, how do you view that partnership in terms of where it's been and where it can go? And secondly, I hear a lot of talk about oil in a climate change environment, and Europe may not be so optimistic about expanding the oil production in Brazil. So first of all, the FDI relationship and what do you think that looks like? And secondly, the climate investment as well, and what that looks like in a changing global environment as well. Thank you. Thank you for the discussion today. I enjoyed it.
Let me just start off because this is an interesting question, because former President Trump on the campaign trail said, the German automakers should make more cars in the United States. So it starts a discussion about what's happening with the manufacturing sector in the European Union, Germany in particular, and so forth. In the United States, we reformed NAFTA with the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. And what that did is it raised the tariff fence against Brazilian automobile components, which was a robust trade with the United States and Canada, lesser Mexico, in that segment. That's now fallen because we've raised the local content, right? And that's why you have BYD, the Chinese battery and now EV maker, taking over the Ford factory in Bahia, and they're going to be, setting up operations, and they'll probably do, fairly well if they keep it within a business model. I think evidently the European manufacturing base needs to rethink how it engages in global value chains and where its growth markets are. And the United States is certainly there, but our population is fairly stable. And of course, if Trump is elected and successfully removes 20 million people, then it'll be less of a consumer market. But I think the European manufacturing base has to look at South America, not as the primary, but how do we redirect manufacturing, foreign direct investment? How do we negotiate technology transfer so that we can begin to manufacture capital equipment and so forth? So, for example, Tyson Krupp, who wants to build electrolyzers to produce green hydrogen in Chile, Colombia, Brazil, and other places. That may be an opportunity to kind of, add some local content by setting up operations in Brazil or Colombia or somewhere, right? And kind of sharing the manufacturing benefits and starting to pivot towards adjacent manufacturing services that can be done in Europe, but exported, where they're expanding the manufacturing base. So, we constantly see the Mercosur EU trade agreement, come up, but it's been around 2 decades before we had cell phones. So maybe that needs a whole new review, but it's a good question. I think Brazil needs to pounce on that. In particular, I think the German automakers and Brazil need to start thinking seriously about the future of the South American car market, or vehicle market, I should say, yeah.
I think about Europe, and we have three points. My view is upon 3 points. The first, in the last month, the trade between Brazil and Europe is about $8.5 billion the last month. To US, $7 billion. To China, $14 billion last month. But we decrease about 22% the trade with China. And we increase about 20% the trade with America. And we keep 7%, just a little bit, 7% with Europe. So the major point of your question, I think that's Brazil. I think Brazil do not look to Europe as Brazil, but as Mercosur. Well, Lula said that. So he's trying to finally sign something like this, the agreement. I don't know if you can bid. I don't put any money that Lula will sign that before in 2 years, of course. So the first point is that Lula think, I don't know why, as Mercosur to Europe is a thing of him. The second point, as the parties in Europe is very important to Lula. When Lula got arrested, when the Workers' Party was very down, the parties in Europe was very important to him because the parties assumed that Lula was put in jail with a suspect judge that after all go to be the minister in Bolsonaro administration. So the parties in Europe is very important to Lula. And finally, with BRICS, we have Russia that the Brazilian administration see as Europe. So this is, I don't know how, it's for you because it's diplomacy, but I don't know how this, when you talk Europe to Brazilian traders, they think in Germany, Italy, France, no one think in Russia, but in terms of BRICS, the Russia is a big partner, European partner. So I don't know. It's for you the answer. And the another question is. Okay. Mr. Haddad created a secretary that deal with the change with the brown economy to the green economy. Mr. Haddad put 4 persons. I think that one's the best persons in the administration to deal with that. If you take all the speeches of the secretary, it's a woman, the Secretary of International Things of Minister of Treasury, she only talk about green economy. So we have the international sector in the Ministry of Treasury, Ministério da Fazenda. We have a new secretary in Ministério da Fazenda, okay? Just talking about that. So when I think that we cannot open the mind of we cannot leave Petrobras as a big company. Of course not. Petrobras is very important for us. But the new administration of Lula all the time talk about the new economy and the green economy. What's the problem? The problem is the fire. We have a huge fires in Brazil. I don't know how the world saw this fire. I don't know how, if the world will see the speech of Lula that is needed transition of economy to green economy. But what is happening in Brazil is the fire. I don't know how the world will see that, but we know that Marina Silva, that is the Minister of Environment, is very powerful in presidency. Not in PT, not in the left, not in the Congress, but in presidency. She's very powerful inside the presidency. So I think that Lula will try to put a mark in environment. He will try to, in somehow, deliver a change of economy in Brazil, looking forward the green economy. All the agencies in Brazil are working to Batlle, that in the next encounter, they are working the next meeting, are working to be a huge success, okay? And this what are you talking about? Petrobras in the Amazon Delta. If this occur, I think that Lula will try to change the model of Petrobras, that be less an oil company and be more an energy company with green energy. I think that this is the model that that guy think.
Regarding to FDI, let me just say you something. We have here the chairman of ABRIG, the Government Relations Association of Brazil. And in Brazil now we're discussing a new lobby bill. Actually, it's not anything new because it never happened. So it's a new law. Lobby has no regulation in Brazil. So if this bill already passed in the House and now it's being discussed in the Senate, the association is lobbying the lobby bill right now. Looks like they're going to be very successful, therefore that's what they do. And looks like to me that a new lobby bill in Brazil could bring foreign investments to the country because it will make our democracy much more transparent. Also, we're discussing a new screening mechanism for the country, and like the CFOs in the US. So I think those moves are important in order to attract, honest, legal investment, not, dishonest investment and black investment to the country. I think we need a clear investment with a democracy and transparency. And I think those two bills being discussed in Congress, I think now could set Brazil a step forward in attracting good foreign direct investment.
This has been a fascinating discussion and an informative one. I want to thank each of our speakers for joining us today. I want to thank our guests from Abrig and our others in attendance today. And thank you for those watching online. Good afternoon.